Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. The void cracked open as the Joktil armada emerged from the veil of hyperspace, their warships materializing like obsidian wraiths against the endless dark. The lead vessel, Tavan, the galactic scourge, was a leviathan of war, its jagged black hull absorbing the distant light of dying stars. Within its command chamber, High Lord Jarkan stood motionless, his slit-pupilled eyes narrowing as the first scans poured in. "Confirm initial reports," he commanded, his voice like grinding stone. Beside him, the observant overseer Stor adjusted the holographic display with a sharp flick of his taloned fingers. The data scrolled in fluid glyphs, dissecting the distant planets with ruthless efficiency. The colony below was small, its structures crude, its defenses laughable. "It is as expected, High Lord," Stor sneered, his elongated face twisting in disdain. His chitinous crest pulsed faintly with the rhythm of his twin hearts. Another feeble breed clutching at the stars, undeserving of the void they inhabit. Across the chamber, Grand Strategist Malvok let out a low, guttural hiss. His thick, plated shoulders shifted as he analyzed the gathered intelligence. "These are the humans? The so-called conquerors?" He exhaled sharply. "I expected a rival worthy of our blades, yet this—" He gestured at the display, where the colony's inhabitants moved obliviously beneath the surveyor scans. "This is an insult." Jarkan's eyes flicked over the data. The settlement below showed no meaningful fortifications, no planetary shields, no standing army prepared for war. The structures were clustered in chaotic fashion, the telltale sign of a species still shackled by disorder. "It is worse than an insult," Jarkan growled, his mandibles flexing in disgust. "It is a mockery of all that we are." Jarkan's claws tightened against the command dais, his slit-pupilled eyes narrowing at the display. World after world had fallen before the might of the Joktil, their fleets unchallenged, their conquests absolute. Every species they encountered had bent the knee or been ground to dust beneath their march. And yet, the name humans had spread in the whispers of broken empires, spoken with an edge of reverence the Joktil found distasteful. Conquerors, they were called, a force that reshaped the stars in their image, a lie. And now, here they were, a colony of nothing. No significant fleets, no significant armies, no worth. Jarkan had expected warriors. What he found were insects. "Expand the scan," he commanded. The hologram shifted, displaying another colony within the system. The second settlement mirrored the first, undefended, unaware, insignificant. Malvok scoffed. "This is no empire, this is livestock." Jarkan's crimson eyes darkened. "And we do not waste words on cattle." The chamber fell into cold silence. He turned, pacing toward the grand viewport where the colony's surface stretched beneath them, unknowing of its impending fate. "Initiate total eradication," Jarkan ordered, his voice the final toll of a funeral bell. "We will leave no trace of this farce." Malvok's mandibles clicked in approval. "Shall we issue a demand for surrender?" Jarkan's expression hardened. "No, they are not worthy of hearing our voices." Stor bared his fangs in approval, striking the command into the interface. In the void, the Joktil warships descended, their weapons roaring to life. The first orbital strikes shattered the silence of the first colony below. Energy beams lanced through the atmosphere, cutting through city centers like molten blades, reducing steel and stone to vapor. Shockwaves rippled outward, toppling towers and igniting fuel reserves in cascading detonations. Civilian transports, attempting to flee, were obliterated mid-ascent, their fiery remains raining down upon the streets they sought to escape. The Joktil took no prisoners. Entire districts were vaporized before the colonists could comprehend what was happening. Resistance, if it could be called that, was snuffed out in moments. Local defense crafts were annihilated before they could even establish formation. Panic swelled like a plague. Humans running for bunkers that would never be enough. On board the Drath Tavan, Jarkan observed the massacre with cold detachment. "Disappointing," he muttered. "They do not even die well." Rethazor folded his arms. "Shall we continue with the extermination, High Lord?" Jarkan's gaze flicked toward a newly intercepted transmission, coordinates, planetary details, atmospheric data. The humans called it Earth. A world brimming with life, with vast cities stretching across its surface. A true homeworld. His mandibles tightened. This one would not be burned to ash. It would be claimed. Aggression without purpose is wasteful, he mused. We take the world they cherish most and reshape it as our own. Burn the rest. Let the humans know that their dominion is a lie. The second colony never had a chance. The Drath Tavan repositioned, leading a new wave of orbital bombardments. This time, the attack was immediate and methodical. The warships descended in tight formation, unleashing precision strikes that vaporized key infrastructure in seconds. Power grids failed as entire blocks collapsed into molten slag. Jagdtil ground forces deployed, sweeping through the ruins with brutal efficiency. Human signals were isolated, tracked, and silenced one by one. Airlocks were breached, shelters incinerated. What little resistance remained was crushed under relentless fire, the air thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning metal. Within minutes, the colony's final distress call flickered and died. Jarkan did not even turn from the viewport. "Move to the next phase," he ordered, his voice as cold as the void. Malvok inclined his head. "The operation is proceeding without deviation. No resistance remains." Jarkan barely nodded. "Then it is finished." On a distant moon, nestled against the jagged ridges of a barren landscape, a single human vessel remained. The Spearhead, a reconnaissance corvette, drifted in watchful silence, its crew of 6 monitoring colony transmissions until the first distress calls shattered the routine. Alec Coven barely had time to react before his console exploded with data. Emergency broadcasts, sensor logs, fragmented distress signals. The sheer flood choked the ship's systems, drowning the bridge in a storm of alarms. Flames consumed the settlements. One by one, the screaming feeds cut to black. "Holy shit," someone whispered. Coven forced himself to breathe, his mind racing. The Jagdtil fleet was moving in formation, encircling the system like vultures over carrion. He could already see their scanners sweeping through the void. They were searching, and they would find them. Coven turned sharply. "Get us out of here, now!" Chief Engineer Don Dane hesitated only for a fraction of a second before his hands flew across the controls. "Prepare to jump!" The proximity alarms wailed. Coven's heart hammered as the tactical display lit up with approaching enemy signatures. The Jagdtil had spotted them. "Helm! Go evasive!" he barked. The ship lurched as the pilot wrenched them into a sharp dive, skimming the moon's surface so low the dust boiled beneath them. The corvette rattled as the first plasma bolt shrieked past, close enough to send a tremor through the hull. 10 seconds to FTL, Dana called. Kovan gritted his teeth. The ship bucked again as another round narrowly missed. The Jagdtil weren't playing with them. They wanted them erased. 5 seconds! The enemy vessels accelerated, closing the distance. Kovan braced himself. Now! The spearhead vanished into the void, seconds before enemy fire slashed through the empty space it left behind. Inside the Drath Tavan, a bridge officer barely spared a glance at the sensor readings before dismissing them. A single ship fled. Overseer Rethazor let out a dismissive chuff. "Let the vermin scatter." High Lord Jarkan did not turn from the viewport. His voice was cold, unbothered. "Insignificant," he hissed. He clasped his hands behind his back, watching as the embers of the colonies flickered and died. "This changes nothing." The spearhead tore through the void, its hull groaning as the FTL drive pushed its limits. Silence gripped the cabin, heavier than the void outside. Alec Coven sat rigid in the pilot's chair, fingers locked around the controls, his grip so tight it hurt as he struggled to process what he had witnessed. Behind him, Chief Engineer Don Dane barely acknowledged the readouts flickering across his console. His mind wasn't on the ship. It was on the colonies, on the millions who had vanished in fire and silence. "We're coming up on Fort Retribution," he muttered, his voice rough. Ahead, the station loomed, a bastion of steel and weaponry, its gun batteries sweeping the abyss, ever watchful. Once a relic of old wars, it now stood as humanity's first wall against the unknown. Coven didn't wait. The moment they hit comms range, he slammed the transmission open. "This is Spearhead, Lieutenant Alec Coven reporting. Priority 1 emergency. Unknown forces have annihilated both human colonies in System K-12. Immediate military response required." Silence. Then, a response. Sharp, urgent. "Spearhead, you are cleared for emergency docking. Report to command immediately." The docking clamps seized the hull with a sharp hiss. The ramp had barely touched the ground before Coven was moving, boots pounding against cold steel, Daney right behind him, clutching the encrypted data drive. They stormed into the war room, where Admiral Frederick Ewing stood over a massive holographic map, analyzing fleet formations. The man's broad frame cast a long shadow over the table, his mind already working before a word was spoken. Beside him, Commander Jabari Avalar, his chief strategist, skimmed through incoming reports, adjusting his glasses with a tight expression. "Lieutenant Covan," Ewing said, his voice razor-sharp. "Report." Covan didn't waste a second. He exhaled sharply, his voice tight. They didn't send a message. No warnings, no demands. One moment the colonies were there. The next, they were gone. He ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, forcing himself to focus. "We were stationed on the far side of the system, scanning telemetry, when the transmissions started cutting out. By the time we realized what was happening, it was already over." He motioned to Dane, who handed Avalar the drive. "We picked up fragments, distress signals, scattered sensor readings, energy signatures. It's not everything, but it's something. Whatever hit us, they weren't invading, Admiral. They were just exterminating. It has everything: ship classifications, attack patterns, energy signatures. We intercepted a name in the colony's final transmissions before they went dark." His jaw clenched. Jarktil. Avalar inserted the drive into the holotable. The room darkened. Holograms flickered to life, towering warships, their movements cold and calculated. They struck without hesitation, reducing entire cities to glowing wreckage. The room fell into dead silence. The destruction was deliberate, merciless. Avalar exhaled sharply. "My God!" Ewing didn't hesitate. "Send it to the High Command. Alert every fleet commander. UED must know everything about this, about them." The transmission moved faster than light, spreading through human space and beyond. Minutes later, battle groups across the galaxy prepared for mobilization. Within an hour, the entire human military was on high alert. The Council of Admirals gathered in the orbital war room, a circular chamber overlooking Earth from the heart of the orbital moon base. The most powerful men in the Earth military stood in grim silence as the reports played on repeat. Admiral Frederick Ewing, Supreme Commander of the Earth Defense Fleet, clenched his fist. "How long until they reach the core systems?" A slight delay preceded the response, as Commander Jabari Avalar's voice came through the encrypted comms from Fort Retribution. "Based on their advance rate, we estimate 3 weeks before they reach any major human world. If they push harder, much less." Ewing's gaze hardened. "Then we don't wait for them to come to us." Across the stars, human fleets assembled with ruthless precision. Carriers deployed fighters. Battleships adjusted trajectories. Every military asset, every hidden weapons platform, every strategic resource was coming online. And yet Earth could not stand alone. Admiral Ewing turned to his diplomatic liaison. "Summon our allies." The message went out, beamed across known space. "To the sovereign powers of the Galactic Council, Humanity has come under attack. The Jacques, an empire from the depths of uncharted space, has declared war upon our people. They have made no demands. They have offered no negotiations. They seek only genocide. We will not ask for your pity. We will not beg for your assistance. We will fight, whether you stand with us or not. But know this, if humanity falls, they will come for you next. The first responses were hesitant. In the Zendar trade halls, humanity's envoy, Ambassador Kian Kaleshian, stood before the council, his expression unreadable as he listened to their bickering. "You hesitate because you think you have time," he said, his voice level. "But when they finish with us, your time will be up." In the Velos Dominion, cautious murmurs spread. Should they risk war with an empire they knew nothing about? But in the shadows of doubt, a few voices rose. The Taval Ascendancy, a race of highly advanced tacticians who once warred with humanity before signing a fragile peace, saw the efficiency of the Jacques' attack patterns. They knew what would happen if humanity fell. The Drylock Enclave, a militaristic race that had long respected humanity's combat prowess, watched the war declaration and saw an opportunity to strike first. Slowly, the tide shifted. Some species remained neutral, their fear outweighing their reason. But others, those who had once dismissed humanity as a reckless upstart race, began to reevaluate. Back in Seoul, strategy was taking shape. Admiral Ewing stood at the center of the War Coordination Chamber, flanked by holographic projections of every fleet commander and intelligence chief. They would not wait. They knew the Jacques were coming. And now, they had a choice. Prepare for a last stand, fortifying systems and buying time at the cost of everything, or strike first. Ewing stood firm. "We will not fight on our own soil. We will not let them set the terms of this war." He turned to his operations chief. "Begin Phase 1. Operation Scorched Fang." A confirmation signal flickered across the holotable as encrypted orders were dispatched. Across multiple systems, a dozen Black Ops squadrons received their mission parameters. Humanity's first move was already underway. Throughout the far reaches of the galaxy, Jacques fleet movements were being tracked. Their supply lines mapped, their advance bases identified. As the invaders pushed ahead, confident that humanity was too weak to resist, they never noticed what was happening behind them. The first strike came in the silence of deep space. A Jacques Vanguard fleet, composed of 6 heavy cruisers and 2 dreadnoughts, had broken from the main force, advancing into a newly mapped corridor toward human space. They expected a clear path, unchallenged, with nothing but the distant glow of a dying star to greet them. Instead, they died screaming. The human ambush was brutal, precise, and unlike anything the Jacques had encountered. The enemy fleet detected nothing until the first Erebus-class stealth frigates emerged from the black, launching volleys of hyper-accelerated kinetic rods. The projectiles ripped through their first cruiser's spinal column, splitting it clean in half before the rest of the fleet even realized they were under attack. Within seconds, ships that had survived countless conquests burned in silence. Aboard the Drathtavan, Rethzor stood rigid at the central tactical station, his slit-pupiled eyes locked onto the holographic projection before him. The battle feed flickered efficiently, updating in real time as data streamed in from the Vanguard fleet's now dying ships. One by one, Jacques vessels were torn of existence, their signals vanishing into the abyss. "This is not possible," Rethzor muttered, mandibles tightening as his taloned fingers swept over the interface, dissecting every sensor reading. There had been no warning, no declaration, no clear enemy formation. The fleet had simply been erased. His subordinates worked feverishly, voices tight with confusion. One of them, a communications officer, snapped his gaze toward the overseer. "The fleet is in total collapse, overseer. No distress calls, no coordinated counterattack." Rethzor cut him off with a sharp gesture. His gaze darkened as the next wave of devastation unfolded before him. A second wave of attacks, human bombers, Modified civilian freighters turned war machines, darted through the wreckage, dropping magnetically guided explosives onto the exposed ventral plates of the surviving ships. Secondary detonations rippled across the cruisers, splitting hulls and tearing through the structural integrity of warships that had never known defeat. The dreadnought Thalvok's Wrath attempted to retaliate, its plasma arrays firing blindly into the void. The Jagdtil expected a counterfleet, a direct engagement, something that made sense. But the humans never fought fair. Their ships didn't engage. They hunted. Rethzor's claws flexed against the interface as he watched the last surviving cruiser vent its atmosphere, its crew choking in the void. The war room was silent, save for the hum of the failing battle feed. One of his junior officers, his voice barely above a whisper, muttered, "This doesn't make sense." Rethzor emitted a guttural snarl, his pupils narrowing. No, it didn't. And that was what unnerved him most of all. Inside Fleet Command Sol, Admiral Frederick Ewing watched the holographic feed as the last Jagdtil ship disintegrated into debris. A satisfied hum spread through the war room. Ewing didn't smile. He opened a secure channel. Avalar, status report. A slight delay preceded the response, as Commander Jabari Avalar's voice came through the encrypted comms from Fort Retribution. No damage on our side. They never got a shot off that mattered. Across the chamber, representatives from newly formed human-alien coalitions observed the feed. Some silent, skeptical, others watching with newfound respect. Ambassador Kian Kaleshian turned to the Zenda envoy, a thin, insectoid being from a species known for strict neutrality. "You see?" Kaleshian said evenly. "They're not invincible. But alone, neither are we." The Zendar flicked its translucent wings, considering. Their kind had never committed to war before. But now, they had seen something they could not ignore. Humanity, a species of strategists, not just warriors. The Taval representative, a towering, scaled figure draped in the ceremonial garb of his people, exhaled through his 3 nostrils. "You are not what we believed," he admitted. Kaleshian nodded. "No one ever thinks we are." In the outskirts of the Tiberian 5 Nebula, a Jagdtil supply convoy, tasked with refueling 3 frontline divisions, drifted confidently through space. At the height of their arrogance, they had no military escort. They had never needed one. Humanity made sure they would never make that mistake again. The first convoy ship vanished without a sound. The second and third followed, their hulls pierced by infrared-guided railgun rounds fired from within the nebula itself. The Jagdtil captains panicked, trying to maneuver, but debris clouded their escape vectors. Debris that hadn't been there before, because it wasn't debris. It was human boarding teams waiting in the wreckage of previously destroyed warships, using the floating carnage as cover. They descended upon the remaining Jagdtil freighters like specters, cutting through airlocks with plasma torches before the crews even realized they had been breached. By the time the Jagdtil command ship realized the danger, its crew was already dead. The entire convoy, 6 ships, thousands of metric tons of supplies, 3 months' worth of fuel, was gone. Humanity did not fight battles. They erased the need for them. On the bridge of the Drath Tavan, the Galactic Scourge, Overseer Rethzor paced before the High Lord's command throne, his talons clicking against the polished floor. "We have lost another fleet," he admitted, voice low. Jarkan didn't respond at first. His crimson eyes watched the display, reading the reports again and again. The casualty list, the lack of resistance, the fact that the enemy hadn't even engaged properly. "We crush the weak," Jarkan said, his voice devoid of emotion. "We have always crushed the weak." His mandibles flexed. "Tell me, Rethzor, are we weak?" The Overseer stiffened. "Never, High Lord." Jarkan leaned forward, his presence suffocating. "Then explain this to me." His claw swept toward the display, where the images of destroyed Jarktil warships flickered like funeral pyres. Rethzor had no answer. Jarkan growled, his rage barely contained beneath his composed exterior. "This defies reason," he murmured. The words tasted like poison, and humanity was just getting started. The Jarktil High War Council gathered in the war chamber, observing the holo display before them in eerie stillness. The data feeds flickered with one undeniable truth. The humans had dealt them a loss, a fleet erased, a convoy annihilated. These were not accidents. High Lord Jarkan sat motionless, his crimson gaze fixed on the scattered wreckage displayed before him. Across the chamber, Overseer Rethzor stood with his back straight, though the subtle twitch of his mandibles betrayed his unease. "They do not fight as the others," Rethzor murmured, his claws tightening against the console. "They do not meet us in battle. They do not stand and break." Jarkan's voice was cold. "Then tell me, Overseer, how do they fight?" Rethzor let out a low, guttural hiss, watching another Jarktil vessel vanish from the tactical display. "Like predators in the dark," he admitted. In the Karvos Rift, a Jarktil reinforcement fleet, nearly 100 ships strong, rushed toward the conflict zones. The High War Council had ordered a full-scale escalation. Humanity would be crushed before it could claim any true victory. But as the fleet pushed forward, their communications fractured, their signals scattered, their fleet formation disrupted. Aboard the lead battleship, Commander Valthur snarled, "Jamming fields?" "No, Commander." His operations officer swallowed. Something worse. From the black of space, false sensor readings flooded their displays. Human ships that weren't there, phantom distress calls that led to dead ends, navigational data corrupted beyond recognition. The Jarktil were being manipulated, their own instruments turning against them. The humans had deployed counterintelligence drones, saturating the sector with false targets, forcing the Jarktil to waste fuel and munitions on enemies that did not exist. By the time they realized the deception, they had drifted directly into a live kill zone. Human cruisers decloaked from behind celestial bodies, their weapons charged and ready. The Jarktil had no time to react. What was meant to be a reinforcement wave became another slaughter. In the void rift of Ordanis, a Jarktil assault flotilla advanced through the sector. The fleet, comprised of 3 battleships, 10 escort cruisers, and 30 strike craft, moved in tight formation, their weapons primed to intercept any human resistance. None came. Instead, the void itself betrayed them. Without warning, the lead battleship's hull buckled inward, massive ruptures peeling across its exterior as it was wrenched apart by forces unseen. Shockwaves rippled through the formation, sending ships careening off course. "What is happening?" barked Fleet Commander Tolzar, his talons digging into the armrests of his command throne. The answer came too late. Explosions erupted from within the fleet, ships torn apart by gravitational anomalies, their structural integrity collapsing in an instant. But it wasn't natural. The humans had detonated modified gravity warheads, salvaged from industrial drilling equipment, refitted to create localized singularity fields. The Jarktil had walked into a minefield of collapsing space itself. Tolzar's battleship twisted as its mass collapsed inward. His last thought was one of confusion, not fear. In the Dragon Expanse, another Jarktil force found itself under siege, but there were no warships to fight. Instead, the wreckage of destroyed human vessels, seemingly abandoned, drifted toward their fleet. The Jarktil, ever methodical, attempted to push through the debris. That was their mistake. The first cruiser detonated from within, torn apart by a chain reaction of explosives hidden inside the drifting wreckage. The humans had booby-trapped their own dead ships, turning them into floating coffins of death. "Adaptive warfare," muttered Commander Vince Corrigan, standing on the bridge of the USS Theseus as he watched the Jarktil formation break apart. "Sir," a lieutenant called from the operations console, "multiple enemy ships are attempting to retreat." Corrigan's expression remained cold. "Not today." Orbital railgun platforms, hidden in the nearby asteroid belt, came online. The retreating Jacques vessels never made it out. On board Fleet Command Sol, Admiral Frederick Ewing stood before a council of military leaders. The war was shifting, and they knew it. "We can't match them in brute force," Ewing said, his voice firm. "But we don't need to. We just need to make them realize they can lose." Within the chamber, representatives from various allied species observed the reports. Some of them had once doubted humanity's capabilities. Now, they watched as an empire that had never been challenged found itself losing ground. "They're panicking," muttered an officer. Ewing nodded once. "Let's make sure they keep doing it." On board the Drathtaven, Rethzor struggled to comprehend the reports flooding in. Entire attack formations lost. The humans had no numerical superiority, no technological advantage, and yet they were bleeding the Jactil at every turn. Jarkan emitted a guttural snarl. "Humans." He practically spat the word. Rethzor hesitated. "They adapt, High Lord, faster than we expected." Jarkan's mandibles clicked. "Then we crush them faster." He turned to the tactical display, issuing a single final order. "All fleets, full-scale planetary invasions." If the humans wanted a war of attrition, the Jactil would bring them one. This would not end in the shadows. It would end in fire. The battlefield had spiraled beyond control. From the outer colonies to the trade lanes of the galactic core, the war was no longer contained. What began as an extermination campaign had evolved into a chaotic, multi-front engagement spanning entire star systems. And humanity was not alone anymore. Aboard the Orbital War Council station, Admiral Frederick Ewing watched as the holographic display blinked with dozens of newly registered fleet signatures, ships of Taval, Drelok, and even hesitant Zendar formations moving to reinforce human battle groups. Commander Jabari Avalar, communicating from Fort Retribution, studied the tactical overlays. 6 months ago, these species wouldn't have even considered standing with us, he muttered. Ewing didn't look away from the display. 6 months ago, they thought we were already dead. Humanity's allies had joined the fight, not out of altruism, but because they had seen the truth. The Jactil could be defeated. The Tival Ascendancy had provided enhanced targeting algorithms, allowing human railgun platforms to increase their effective range by nearly 30%. The Drelok Enclave, renowned for their brutal siege tactics, had shared energy dispersion techniques, reinforcing human shield harmonics to withstand Jactil plasma weaponry for crucial extra seconds in battle. Even the Zendar, reluctant as ever, had deployed stealth observation vessels, feeding intelligence into the Coalition's command network. Ewing exhaled, watching the battle lines form. "We don't need to match their firepower," he said. "We just need to make sure every loss costs them more than it costs us." Across the warfront, that philosophy was already in motion. On Tiberius IV system, a deep space engagement unfolded. A Jactil assault force moved through the sector in standard formation, a wall of heavy capital ships, flanked by escort cruisers and swarms of strike craft. They had spent weeks hunting human forces, only to find nothing but empty space and shattered debris fields. The frustration in Commander Vakthar's voice was undeniable. "Where are they?" His weapons officer, a younger Jactil with burning impatience, snarled. "We should not be chasing vermin through the stars. We should be—" The warship lurched violently. An instant later, 2 of their escorts detonated, not from enemy fire, but from within. Vakthar spun to his sensors officer. "What?" The answer hit them all at once. Sabotage. The humans had planted sleeper explosives inside previously lost vessels, leaving them drifting in the wreckage fields of old battles. Now, as the Jactil repurposed those same ships for material reclamation, they had unknowingly carried death directly into their formations. Before Vakthar could issue an order, a human strike wing emerged from below the system's orbital plane, launching fusion lances straight into the exposed ventral hulls of the already compromised warships. By the time the Jarktil realized what had happened, it was too late. Aboard the Drath Tavern, Overseer Rethzor studied the newest war reports, his talons flexing against the interface. High Lord Jarkan sat motionless on his command throne, staring at the void beyond the viewport. The silence was heavier than the last engagement. "Their strategy is a sickness," Rethzor muttered. Jarkan's mandibles barely moved. "Explain." Rethzor's pupils narrowed. "They fight like a disease. They burrow into weaknesses we never considered, infect our formations, and break us from the inside." A low rumble echoed from deep within Jarkan's chest. "They have no honor." Rethzor hesitated. "No, High Lord." His voice was measured, careful. "They have no limits." Jarkan rose from his throne. "Then we end this." He gestured toward the war map, a single target illuminating the display, a key human outpost in the Varnix belt. "Our intelligence indicates this is a central command for their entire resistance," Jarkan said, his voice sharp as a blade. "If we burn it to the void, their forces will fracture. The war will end." Rethzor hesitated, his mind scanning through the countless reports of human unpredictability. Yet, they had never defended a single position with overwhelming force. They attacked and disappeared, never standing their ground. Perhaps this time, they wouldn't have a choice. Jarkan's gaze locked onto the Overseer. "Deploy the fleet," he ordered. Rethzor inclined his head. "It will be done, High Lord." Across Jarktil warspace, thousands of warships mobilized, an armada unlike anything seen before. This would be the decisive strike. This would be the end of the human resistance. Or so they believed. The Varnix Belt outpost floated in eerie stillness, its massive metal structure anchored to the largest asteroid in the sector. Inside, Admiral Ewing, Commander Avalar, and a select team of human officers watched as the Jarktil fleet approached. "They took the bait," Avalar said. Ewing's gaze was unflinching. "Let them come." Behind them, hundreds of warships, not human, but of Taval, Drylock, and other coalition fleets, lay in wait, hidden within the dense radiation fields of the surrounding asteroid belt. This was not a last stand. High Lord Jarkan sat rigid in his command throne, eyes narrowing as the sensor arrays flooded with anomalous readings. "Report," he growled, his mandibles flexing. Rethzor's voice was uncharacteristically tense. "Something is amiss, High Lord. The human outpost is—" He hesitated. Jarkan's gaze flicked toward the view screen. The station was intact, exactly where it should be. But the surrounding space was different, too still, too quiet. The usual cosmic debris fields were present, but something in the patterns of the wreckage felt deliberate. Then the sensor alarms screamed, "High Lord, it's a trap!" The void erupted in fire. The first volley of mass driver rounds came from the asteroid belt, striking the flanks of the Jarktil formation before their shields could even cycle to full power. Explosions ripped through the forward cruisers, breaking their formations instantly. Out of the radiation fields, human warships decloaked, not a few, but hundreds. Coalition forces, humanity's allies, had been waiting in complete silence. And now, they struck as one. Jarktil captains scrambled to adjust their formation, but it was too late. The entire sector was a kill box. Hidden orbital platforms lit up, launching salvo after salvo of guided munitions straight into the heart of the Jarktil command ships. The dreadnought Vathkal took a direct hit to its reactor core, igniting a chain reaction that vaporized everything within a 10-kilometer radius. Swarms of human strike craft weaved between panicked Jarktil formations, dropping cluster bombs and EMP warheads. Their precision was surgical, targeting weapons arrays, engine systems, command bridges, crippling the invaders before they could even fight back. Within the Drathtavan, Jarkan watched in stunned silence as his fleet crumbled before his eyes. This is impossible," Rethzor muttered, his claws trembling over the control panel. A detonation rocked the flagship, sending shockwaves cascading through its reinforced hull. Secondary power systems flickered, and for the first time, Zarkon felt something foreign and vile crawl up his spine. Doubt. The Drathtavan shook violently, flames licking across its outer hull as the flagship's defense systems buckled. Zarkon's hands clenched around the arms of his throne. "Status," he barked. "Shields failing. Weapon arrays compromised. Engineering decks." An explosion cut the officer off. The war room descended into chaos. Zarkon rose to his feet, his presence still towering, still commanding, despite the flames and death around him. His empire was dying before him, and yet, they should be losing, he growled, more to himself than anyone else. Reth Zor, clutching a console for stability, turned to him. "High Lord, we must retreat." Zarkon didn't answer. His crimson gaze was locked onto the main battle display, watching as the last remnants of his fleet were torn apart. Hundreds of Zarktil warships, obliterated. The Coalition's losses were minimal. His mandibles clicked, his body coiled with barely contained rage. For centuries, the Zarktil had been the storm, the force of nature that others fled from. Now, they were the ones drowning. From the bridge of the USS Osiris, Admiral Frederick Ewing stood with his arms crossed, watching the battle unfold exactly as planned. Beside him, Commander Jabari Avalar observed the real-time tactical feed, his expression cold, calculating. "They're breaking," he noted. Ewing's expression remained impassive. "No." His gaze locked onto the Zarktil command ships, now floundering without coordination. "They're already broken." Across the battlefield, humanity's fleet tightened the noose. Gravity mines activated, locking Zarktil battleships into predetermined firing lanes where they were cut to pieces by long-range artillery. Drylock warships, their cloaking systems perfectly synced with human jamming fields, phased in and out of visual detection, tearing through Zarktil strike wings with plasma lances. Taval battlecruisers, armed with reverse-engineered Zarktil plasma weapons, turned their own technology against them, burning holes through hulls that had never known fear. The Coalition forces did not fight like separate species. They fought like a machine, their strategies perfectly synchronized, their maneuvers precise and unrelenting. And the Zarktil had no answers. On the USS Osiris, Avalar turned to Ewing. "Their formation has collapsed. Most of their fleet is crippled." Ewing's gaze remained fixed on the holo display. "Status on the capital ships?" A pause. Then an operations officer responded. "They're still operational, but heavily damaged. If they retreat now, they won't be able to mount another offensive for years." Ewing nodded. "Then we finish this." He turned, stepping toward the main command console. "All squadrons." His voice was calm, final. "Target the capital ships." Avalar tapped his console, transmitting the command. On the battlefield, human and Coalition forces adjusted their trajectories, their sights now locked onto the last standing symbols of Zarktil power. The moment of the final strike had finally come. And they came with fire and silence. Human and Coalition warships converged like predators, their weapons locking onto the last surviving Zarktil capital ships. These war behemoths, massive black-hulled titans, the pride of an empire that had never tasted defeat, now stood on the brink of destruction. The Osiris, flagship of the human fleet, led the charge. Admiral Frederick Ewing stood at the command dais, his expression unreadable as he watched the barrage unfold. The first volley of kinetic slugs struck the Zarktil command dreadnought, piercing its reinforced plating like paper. Its shields, once thought impenetrable, collapsed under the relentless onslaught of mass accelerators and plasma lances. From his station, Commander Jabari Avalar observed the tactical display, the enemy's formation unraveling in real time. "Primary target is breaking apart," he reported. The dreadnought lurched violently, its engines failing as internal explosions ripped through its spine. Secondary detonations shattered its main reactor, and the once glorious warship crumbled in a silent inferno, its wreckage scattering across the void. The coalition forces pushed forward, relentless and without hesitation. Taval warships, their energy lances burning white-hot, carved through the remaining Jacques cruisers. Drylock shock troops, aboard their intercept frigates, disabled escape vessels, cutting off any hope of retreat. Human bombers swept through the wreckage, delivering final strikes against damaged warships, ensuring they would never rise again. For the first time in the history of their kind, the Jacques were the ones with fear. On board a surviving Jacques battleship, Commander Kareth clenched his mandibles, his claws gripping the tactical console. His fleet was in ruins, his weapons nearly depleted, but he refused to accept what was now undeniable. "We can still fight," he snarled. "Form a massive shockwave tore through the bridge as a coalition railgun salvo struck the vessel's dorsal hull. The ship buckled, the walls screaming under the pressure. Kareth stumbled, the air thick with smoke as consoles overloaded and exploded around him. He turned to his operations officer. But the Jacques was already dead, his body limp against the wreckage. The reality of the moment set in. "We have lost." The words crawled through Kareth's mind like a disease, and yet his hands refused to surrender. He let out a low, guttural hiss and forced himself to stand, activating the final thruster banks. If he could just ram the nearest enemy cruiser, if he could just take one more of them down. The USS Osiris fired its primary railgun. The Kareth's battleship ceased to exist. The last Jacques warships twisted and burned, their once imposing hulls cracking under the relentless onslaught. Plasma fires raged across fractured decks, entire command centers crushed by internal collapses, their crews dragged into the void as atmospheric breaches devoured what little remained of their control. A crippled battlecruiser, its engines failing, tried to limp away from the destruction. But before it could even attempt an FTL jump, a Taval dreadnought descended upon it like a predator, its plasma lances slicing through the hull with scalpel-like precision. The warship split in two, its molten remains spinning wildly before shattering into a cascade of glowing fragments. Further out, a squadron of Jacques escort frigates formed a desperate defensive perimeter, attempting to buy time for the few remaining ships to escape. Their maneuvering was tight, disciplined, but it no longer mattered. A cluster of Drylock interceptors burst from the wreckage fields, moving too fast for the frigates to counter. Their sleek, agile fighters cut through the formation, their pulse cannons punching through weak spots in Jacques armor, one after another. A detonating reactor core sent a shockwave through the sector, knocking one of the last command vessels off course. It spiraled, its communications filled with static-laced distress signals before it was snatched by the gravitational pull of a shattered carrier's wreckage. The two ships collided in a blinding detonation, debris scattering across the battlefield like dying embers. A final battleship, one of the oldest and most decorated in the Jacques Armada, pushed forward, its weapons still firing in defiance of the inevitable. It unleashed a full broadside into a human battle group, only for the shots to disperse harmlessly against reinforced shields. Its defiance lasted mere seconds. The Osiris fired its main railgun, the shot tearing through the warship's reinforced command spire, sending the vessel into a slow, uncontrolled descent. Fires consumed its inner decks as the ship drifted, powerless, into the remains of its fallen fleet. With each passing second, the void grew quieter. The once unstoppable conquerors reduced to burning husks, their empire left as drifting wreckage. On the bridge of the Osiris, Admiral Frederick Ewing stood motionless, watching the battlefield dissolve into smoldering debris and fading embers. Commander Jabari Avalar stepped forward, scanning the tactical readouts. All enemy vessels within the sector have been neutralized. He glanced toward the last flickering blips on the display. The few that remain are trying to retreat, but... He exhaled. Most won't make it. Ewing's gaze remained locked on the ruins of the Jacques command ships, now nothing more than lifeless husks drifting in the abyss. They thought we were harmless, that they could simply erase us, he said. They thought wrong. Inside the Drathtavan, High Lord Jarkon stood motionless, watching as his empire burned. The transmissions from his remaining commanders were desperate, pleading. "High Lord, our defenses are failing. We have lost the forward battle group. We need reinforcements. One by one their signals were cut short, drowned in the growing abyss of static. Jarkon did not move, his hands clenched around the arms of his throne, but his face remained stone, unreadable. Behind him, Overseer Rethazor hesitated before speaking. "High Lord." His voice was measured, cautious. "The command fleet is—" Jarkon's gaze did not waver from the battlefield. Gone. There was nothing left to command, and then the alarms inside the Drathtavan screamed. Jarkon rumbled deep in his throat, the chaos around him distant, meaningless. He had spent decades forging the Jarktil Empire into an unstoppable force, and yet his empire no longer existed. A warship exploded just outside the viewport, its burning hull drifting lifelessly. One more signal vanished from the command interface. Rethazor turned to him, eyes filled with something the Overseer had never felt before. Fear. "The enemy is moving toward us," he said quietly. Jarkon's gaze flicked to the Osiris, the vessel leading the final approach. He saw the warships surrounding it, saw the coordination, the ruthless efficiency with which the humans had torn through his people's legacy. There was no rage, no defiance, only the weight of a war already lost. Jarkon sat back in his throne. His empire was gone, and soon he would be too. A distant explosion rumbled through the flagship, a warning tremor before the true collapse began. The command deck shuddered violently as explosions rippled across the superstructure, sending flames and smoke pouring through the failing corridors. Officers scrambled, desperately trying to hold what little control remained over the flagship. High Lord Jarkon did not move. He stood at the center of the wreckage, eyes locked onto the failing tactical display as the last of his ships disappeared from existence, one by one. The empire he had spent a lifetime expanding was gone. His mandibles tightened, but he did not speak. Overseer Rethazor, battered and bleeding from a deep gash along his side, clutched a damaged console, his breathing heavy. "High Lord." His voice wavered. "We must order the retreat." Jarkon's claws flexed. Retreat. The word burned. For centuries, the Jarktil had only known conquest. To retreat was to acknowledge weakness, to admit inferiority. And yet, there was no empire left to command. The realization cut deeper than any blade. Slowly, he turned toward his remaining bridge officers, all of them watching in silent desperation. He spoke the words that no Jarktil had ever spoken before. "Order the withdrawal." A pause. Then, the order swept through what remained of the fleet, a final decree of a dying empire. What was left of the Jarktil armada broke apart, ships turning away from the battle that had already been lost. But not all of them escaped. As soon as the retreat began, human and coalition warships opened fire on the stragglers, tearing through already crippled vessels. Small detachments of Jarktil warships attempted to flee, only to be hunted down, their escape routes cut off by strategically placed interdiction fields. One by one, they were destroyed. Only a fraction of the original fleet managed to jump away, and even those that did were scattered, broken, leaderless. There was no formation, no chain of command, just survivors fleeing into the abyss. On board the Osiris, the war room was silent. Avalar observed the sensor feeds, watching the last remaining enemy ships retreat beyond their targeting range. "They're running," Avalar said. Ewing didn't respond at first. His eyes remained on the display, watching as the Jarktil forces fragmented, dissolving into nothingness, their once mighty fleet now reduced to scattered survivors, fleeing like wounded beasts. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "We go after them," he said, his voice measured. "Make sure they don't regroup, push them past the outer sectors. Let them disappear into the void, but not before they know they can never return." Across the galactic network, news of the Jarktil collapse spread like wildfire. An empire that once rose to annihilate humanity had now collapsed into nothing. Civilizations that had once hesitated to act now spoke of the war with awe and disbelief. The once unstoppable war machine had been broken, its fleet scattered, its power shattered. And at the center of it all stood humanity. Once dismissed as just another species, they had defied extinction, turning the tide of war against an enemy that had never known defeat. Now, no one would ever underestimate them again. Deep in uncharted space, far beyond the known borders, the remnants of the Jarktil fleet drifted through the darkness. The survivors did not speak. There was nothing left to say. On board the Drathtavan, Jarkon sat in silence, staring at the vast emptiness before him. The Empire was gone, and the enemy was still out there, waiting, watching. Now the Jarktil knew the truth. They called themselves conquerors. But they met an enemy that cannot be conquered. Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and one last thing. Every great soldier knows that to survive and become a hero, taking care of yourself is key. So before you go, check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's important. And I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.